Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll be starting on page 300 of Marcus Garvey and the Vision of Africa. The following excerpts are going to be Garvey's own words.
Greetings. My name is the Revolutionary Matron, and my show is called The Learning Curve. I broadcast on a network called KWAZ Radio. There are other hosts on the network I'd like you to meet.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed here belong solely to the respondents, and they do not necessarily reflect any broadcast networks, affiliates, nor sponsors. The Learning Curve is a broadcast created for the benefit of my global community. Black is a consciousness. Content is being used for our commentary, research, criticism, education, scholarship, teaching, preaching, and news reporting. No copyright infringement is intended. I will make enunciation mistakes. I will give you my opinion about the information. And if you ever ask, I will send you my source.
Negro Progress postulates Negro government. An article from the Black Man dated April 23rd, 1929, on page 2 by Marcus Garvey. Whether it be viewed from the moral, legal, industrial, and economic, social, or political standpoint, there is no reasonable ground of objection to the establishment of a system of government by Negroes for Negroes. And such a system will not be characterized, as some persons fear, by the primitivism of intertribal strife and savage perpetual warfare for temporary supremacy of this or that tribal leader. For the race is endowed with the instincts of government that bore the high marks of a high civilization, to which, in certain features, our boasted Western culture has not made a worthy approach. The race has fallen, but her instincts are not dead. The silence of centuries has been broken. Her winter has passed, and her springtime is here, with the promise of the bountiful harvest, for Negro genius has again been fanned into activity and is ready to infuse into Negro life the qualities and characteristics that made Negroes great in their institutions of the past. The seat of empire northward moves was true to history and poetry during the period of Negro decline, but its northern limit has been reached, and with the revival of Negro activity, its path has again turned south. For empire has not only a seat, but a home, and that home is Africa. It is well for Black men to think on these things and to notice movements that are contributory to this end. Jamaica is to be favored in August with the General Convention of the UNIA movement. And while we can make only the briefest reference to the subject today, we would ask Negroes to say what is their mind upon the matter. What do they expect to see and hear? They possibly have read concerning former conventions held in New York. These have been wonderful happenings for a wonderful country. What is their conjecture concerning that to be held in Jamaica? Hundreds and hundreds of Negro delegates from all parts of the world will meet from day to day for the whole month in discussion on Negro problems and world issues as they affect the Negro. What is the aim? What will be its effect? Can Jamaica Negroes and the Jamaica community be the same after the convention? And will not this convention, in its implications and bearings, be significant in regard to the growing consciousness of kinship of Negroes in whatever part of the world they are found? Can it leave us without a strong, irresistible urge to realize the meaning of common, permanent government with a fixed habitation and a name? The convention will be a demonstration of the possibilities of Negro government that no one can deny. Greetings, Forecast and Pro-Black Perspectives. Oni, how are you tonight? The World as It Is, an article appearing in The Black Man on May 8th, 1929, pages 1 and 8. One Mr. Sparks and his Anthropology, South Africa and the Natives, Politicians and General Elections. One Mr. Parks of Slipe Road, Kensington, has written us a letter dealing with the question of, as he terms it, anthropology. The letter is really a castigation of us for referring to an esteemed fellow citizen a couple of days ago as being of colored blood. For what we know of anthropology, we find ourselves very unlearned. When we have to admit Mr. Sparks' new definition of the subject. This is what Mr. Sparks says in his Anthropology, which is very amusing to us. For your information, white men having children with Negro women do not make those children Negroes, as the man reproduces his race, no matter who the woman may be. Now, isn't this a foolish statement for Mr. Sparks to make and call it anthropology? Now, answer us this. If a white man has a child by a black woman, and the child is to be called a white man because of the father's reproduction, when this child marries another black woman and has a child, according to you, this child would also be a white man, and this child in turn will marry another woman and have a child. Now, how ignorant a proposition is it to suggest that this child would be a white man? Your anthropology hasn't any legs to stand on. It is blatant ignorance, but we must admit that you have suggested it as an excuse for colored people not calling themselves Negroes. The laugh is with us Negroes and the white people over those who do not want to admit themselves Negroes as members of a race. South Africa is a hotbed of trouble when the natives, who are black, and the colonists, who are European. There are 2 million Europeans in and around the Union of South Africa, with more than 6 million natives. These 2 million have been trying to rob the entire South Africa from the natives who originally owned the country. This leaves no room for any goodwill between the two peoples. What the outcome will be, only God can tell. There is one thing, however, that we know, and that is the natives are not going to die without striking back. And so we may look forward to a terrible time of unrest from that section of the world. It is a pity because the great question in dispute could be settled amicably by just being fair to the natives. The World as It Is, an article by Marcus Garvey, published in the Black Man magazine, May 14th, 1929, pages 1 and 2. A brutal man. Excuse me. A poor black boy trying to earn a living by running tasks and carrying bananas for the Jamaica Fruit and Shipping Company at the number 3 pier was beaten up a couple of days ago by the assistant wharfinger. He was boxed out of line by this man and kicked severely on his jaw. The poor boy was brought to our office and showed plainly the effects of his maltreatment. A reputable doctor has given a certificate touching on the boy's condition, and there are many witnesses to prove the gross advantage taken of him by this brutal wharfinger. An occurrence of this kind could not have taken place anywhere in the civilized world without calling forth the gross indignation of the community. In Jamaica, where the poor black people are not counted, such an occurrence goes unnoticed until this time. We have here a society for the protection of cruelty to animals, which very often prosecutes cruel persons for ill treating animals. None of the people interested in such a society have said anything about the brutal treatment of this black boy. But we are determined to see that justice is done him. We feel somewhat sure that the managers of the Jamaica Fruit and Shipping Company, whose bananas he was handling, have not sanctioned such brutal treatment by their employees to laborers. We are now bringing the matter prominently before the Jamaica public and government. Jamaica is being scandalized by the barbarous handling of the black people on the waterfront. Some of those men who are in charge take it as a delight to hit the poor laborers with sticks, to abuse them and treat them most wickedly, especially on the approach of tourist ships, as to show off to the tourists the social relationship between the people here so that they go away with the impression that the black people are dogs. All self-respecting Negroes must be incensed at such an action. Any man occupying the position of assistant wharfinger who did anything of the kind ought to be regarded as an unsafe person to invest with any authority. The Jamaica Fruit Company, like other fruit companies, is making its fortune out of these poor black laborers. Common decency ought to teach them that they should treat people with courtesy and consideration. If this thing had happened in America, the assistant wharfinger would have been immediately arrested, but nothing has been done to him up to the present, although complaint has been made. He calculates that because the boy only earns an average of 3 cents per week, no, $6 per week, it would be impossible for him to spend that to find a lawyer in prosecuting him. So he took advantage of beating the poor boy. He is just a raggedy boy, but that makes the case even more important in that the wharfinger is so low down as to have taken advantage of the boy because of his helpless condition. He knew well that because the other poor Negroes were anxious to get a day's work, they would not retaliate in protection of the boy. He even inspired them to help beat up the boy. That is another awful state of affairs. It borders on slavery. Uncle Tom's Cabin, as brought to us by Harriet Beecher Stowe, is strikingly similar. Still, we are nearly 100 years removed from slavery. Are we going to stand for this in civilized Jamaica? Surely not. What the men on the waterfront should have done when the assistant wharfinger attempted to beat up one of their kind was to get a hold of him and chuck him into the sea. But I suppose that the men were too cowardly to do that, calculating that they would have lost their employment or that they would have been brutally treated by the forces of the Jamaica Fruit Company, would have called them in to handle them. Not very long ago, the same advantage was taken of a large number of Jamaica laborers in Santa Maria, and when they attempted to retaliate, the Colombian soldiery was called in to shoot them down like dogs. That could not have happened in Jamaica today, because those of us who are on guard in protecting the rights of the Black people would have immediately got in touch with His Excellency the Governor or the Secretary of State to see that the power of the law be not used by any class to take advantage of another. If the associates of this boy had held on to the assistant wharfinger and given him a good whipping or thrown him into the sea, they would have been justified. We hope this is the last we will hear of this brutality on the waterfront, because we are going to encourage our men to hit back and hit hard and hold on to anyone attempting to take advantage of them. In this case, we are going to take the matter to the court to see that the boy is protected. We hope the Jamaica Fruit Company will do the right thing by dismissing this brutal assistant wharfinger. Greetings, Sister Ra. How are you today? The World as It Is, an article by Marcus Garvey, published in the Black Man magazine, May 17th, 1929, pages 1 and 8. Insulting Negro Womanhood. It is an unfortunate thing that the Negro womanhood of Jamaica in particular, and of the West Indies in general, can be so abused without any protection given them or interest taken in the matter. We have before us the case of a prominent man who is only one of many who has taken gross advantage of a Negro girl, yet he continues to enjoy public respect. Unfortunately, the man himself is a Negro. His action toward a member of his own race is worse than if it were committed by a man of another race. This man is wealthy. He was not always so. He was once a poor man. When he was poor, he got engaged to a colored girl, probably with the best intention. When he started to get rich, he started to ignore his colored fiancée, to put her off, and tell her all kinds of false tales with the object of breaking his pledge. According to the man's way of thinking, he had become so sufficiently prominent and rich to enter into society, and so he wanted a white wife, apparently, as most successful Negro men of certain turn of mind do after amassing fortunes. The colored girl refused to release him from his obligation, and so because he feared a suit for breach of promise, he has not yet married a white woman, but doesn't want to marry a colored girl anymore. Yet during the time, he has been taking advantage of colored girls, and in one instance has made one a mother. This treatment to colored girls is common among us, and it is time a halt be called, if by no one else, then by the black men, in exposing such cases to the public. It is a dirty trick on the part of successful Negroes to spend 2/3 of their lives amassing wealth from among the Negro people, that when they become rich, they marry outside their own race to die shortly after, leaving their fortunes made from Negro people to go into the coffers of other people who are sufficiently independent and provided for, while the Negro race still remains in poverty. This is still true to this day. Perhaps we'll talk about it later. It is a shame, and we shall make it a point of our duty to at all times bring any abuse of our womanhood to the attention of the public. Not too long ago, a prominent doctor died and left a fortune. The fortune went to the white lady he married and naturally to her relatives. The doctor, like most of our successful men, came up through difficulties. His very poor Negro parents labored hard to give him an education. Nearly everything he got by way of education and start in life came through Negroes. The success of his profession was ensured through Negroes because all of his patients were Negroes. Yet when he became rich, instead of marrying a Negro woman like his mother, he married a white woman. And now that he is dead, all of his wealth is gone out of the race. There is one thing that we have to admire the white man for, and that is he is never found disloyal to his race. We find isolated individual cases where individuals of the white race marry Negro women, but not where they have to give their fortunes to these women or their relatives. It is always the case that the Negro women are rich when marriages take place between them and white men. We hope that the public sentiment will be stirred as to make it impossible for successful Negro men to so insult our womanhood, and we hope that gentlemen we have in mind will marry the poor nurse he has dishonored. Greetings, Anthony McPhail. How are you tonight? The World as It Is, an article by Marcus Garvey, published in The Black Man on Friday, January 31st, 1930. Internal Prejudices of Negroes. According to the arrangement of the colored leaders, the following plan is decided and acted upon. It is made very successful in the West Indies and is now being successfully fostered in America and elsewhere. In countries where the blacks outnumber the whites, the colored build up a buffer society through the financial assistance and patronage of the minority whites. They convince the minority whites that the blacks are dangerous and vicious, and that their only chance of successfully living among them is to elevate to positions of trust, superiority, and overseership of the colored element who will directly deal with the blacks and exploit them for the general benefit of the whites. The whites, being not strong enough to stand alone, accept our acquiescence, and thus the colored element is elevated to a superior position and naturally becomes attached to the whites. The skillful group, however, by its ability to acquire wealth through the privileged position allowed, immediately starts out to socially equip itself educationally and culturally to meet the whites on equal terms. They also skillfully strengthen their positions by stirring up the blacks against the whites, explaining to the former that all their ills are caused by the whites, Then they go back to the whites and intimidate them by drawing their attention to the great danger of the dissatisfied blacks and offer as a solution the uniting of the whites and colored in a social and economic union to offset the supposed common danger of the blacks, buffer classes. By this artful method, the colored elements of the colonies have socially subdued the white man, who now looks on and sees the prosperous colored gentleman leading away his sister or daughter in the bonds of marriage without the ability to raise a voice of protest. The colored elements have arranged it so that the blacks are always kept down, so that they can use their dissatisfaction and disaffection as an argument to strengthen and further perpetuate their positions of social equality and economic privilege and preferment with the whites. Such is the game that is being played over in America by Du Bois, Weldon Johnson group of colored persons of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The Universal Negro Improvement Association stands in opposition to this association on the miscegenation question because we believe in the racial purity of both the Negro and the white races. We feel that the moral disadvantage of slavery should not be perpetuated, that where our slave masters were able to abuse our slave mothers and thereby create a hybrid bastardy, we ourselves, at this time of freedom and culture, should not perpetuate the crime of nature. We desire to standardize our race morally, hence our advocacy of all elements and shades within the race coming together and by well understood and defined codes build up a strong and healthy Negro race with pride and respect in itself, rather than seeking, as the Du Bois group does, to practice unrestricted intercourse of miscegenation. All the hate that the leaders of the small colored group can find has been levied at me for my interference with and interruption of their plans. My indictment, conviction, and imprisonment are but a small effort of theirs to help destroy and ruin me because of my effort to save the Negro race from extinction through miscegenation. Don't I tell y'all that integration and assimilation are death? Garvey felt the same way. That colored group has scientifically arranged their method of propaganda. In America and the colonies, they hold out certain baits and hopes to the educated and financially prosperous men of the darker groups, such as encouraging them to marry the very lightest element of their women and adopting them into their society. These darker men, for the special privilege and honor, are used as active propagandists to deceive the great mass of dark people so that they would not suspect the motive or the design of the colored element. Generally, the darker men who marry the very lightest colored women, who sometimes pass off as white, become more hostile to their kind in the mass as well as by individual contact than the very leaders, as the leaders are generally careful to not attract or arouse suspicion of their motive. The majority of the colored leaders who seek after white women and the darker men who marry very light colored women are seldom on social terms with their own mothers if they are dark. If they have their mothers in their homes, which is generally never so. They hide them away either in the kitchen or in the back room where they do not come in contact with either their light colored or white guests. Such is the great problem that I have sought to solve, and no one will wonder why I have been made a criminal in the struggle to rescue and save the Negro race from itself and from continuous suffering and ultimate extermination. The next article is called The Negro's Place in World Reorganization, an article by Marcus Garvey, published in The Black Man, Saturday, February 1st, 1930. Gradually, we are approaching the time when the Negro peoples of the world will have either to consciously, through their own organization, go forward to the point of destiny as laid out by themselves, or must sit quiescently and see themselves pushed back into the mire of economic serfdom to be ultimately crushed by the grinding mill of exploitation and be exterminated ultimately by the strong hand of prejudice. There is no doubt about it that we are living in the age of world reorganization, out of which will come a set program for the organized races of mankind that will admit of no sympathy in human affairs, in that we are planning for the great gigantic struggle of survival of the fittest group. It becomes each and every one engaged in this great race for place and position to use whatsoever influence possible to divert the other fellow's attention from the real object. In our own sphere of America and the Western world, we find that we are being camouflaged, not so much by those with whom we are competing for our economic political existence, but by men from within our own race, either as agents of opposition or as unconscious fools who are endeavoring to flatter us into believing that our future should rest with chance and the providence, believing that through these agencies will come the solution of the restless problem. Such leadership is but preparing us for the time that is bound to befall us if we do not exert ourselves now toward our own creative purpose. The mission of the Universal Negro Improvement Association is to arouse the sleeping consciousness of Negroes everywhere to the point where we will, as one concerted body, act for our own preservation. By laying the foundation for which we will be able to work toward the glorious recognition of an emancipated race and a constructed nation. Nationhood is the strongest security of any people, and it is for that the Universal Negro Improvement Association strives at this time. With the clamor of other peoples for a similar purpose, we raise a noise even to high heaven for the admission of the Negro into the plan of autonomy. On every side, we hear the cry of white supremacy in America, in Canada, in Australia, in Europe, and even in South America. There is no white supremacy beyond the power and strength of the white man to hold himself against others. The supremacy of any race is not permanent. It is a thing only if the time in which the race finds itself powerful. The whole world of white men is becoming nervous of touching its own future, and that of other races. With the desire of self preservation, which naturally is the first law of nature, they raise the hue and cry that the white race must be first in government and in control. What must the Negro do in the face of such a universal attitude but align all his forces in the direction of protecting himself from the threatened disaster of race domination and ultimate extermination? Without a desire to harm anyone, the Universal Negro Improvement Association feels that the Negro should, without compromise or any apology to the same spirit of racial pride and love as the great white race is doing for its own preservation. So that while others are raising the cry of white America, a white Canada, a white Australia, we also, without reservation, raise the cry of a Black Africa. The critic asks, is it possible? And 400 million courageous Negroes of the world answer, yes. An apostrophe to Miss Nancy Kennard, an article published in the New Jamaican, July 28, 1932. Nature, for her own purpose, made us racially separate and almost distinct, if from no other point of view from the physiological, in so much so that we are Chinese, Japanese, English, French, Dutch, African, Indian, and the rest of it. In the course of our human growth, we recognize, and strongly so, this great difference. But what may be missing in this particular seems to be made up for and is common to all of us, and that is the ability to think. But even in the realms of thought, men differ. Hence, our manifold systems of politics, philosophy, and religion. We do not think all alike on any of these subjects or questions, but in the great world of things, whether we are Chinese, Japanese, Anglo-Saxon, Teuton, Latin, or African, there is always a circle of mental companionship wherein we see and admire things from the same viewpoint. We not only think them, but we feel them, so that the student can well appreciate a member of one race in comradeship or camaraderie with the member of another, whether the racial difference be black or white or yellow or brown. The world wonders why Miss Nancy Kennard thinks sympathetically black. It is with the same reason that the black man thinks sympathetically white whenever any outrage is attempted or perpetuated upon the white race anywhere. Black men have shoulders and arms in wars to protect the lives of white men, not because they, the black men, were particularly affected, but because of the deep human sympathy and mental viewpoint of right against wrong. It was the same among white men during the time of the American Civil War, when Garrison, Lovejoy, and Lincoln thought that it was cruel to hold black men in bondage. If we were to resurrect the world and should awaken through it, we would find strange company in the realms of thought, because Socrates may forsake the companionship of the Greeks to find more pleasant mental atmosphere from the Romans. Cicero may forsake the Romans to find better companionship with the Africans. Theodore Roosevelt may forsake the white American race to find mental comradeship with Booker T. Washington, the sage and seer of Tuskegee. And in the same realm, now resurrected, Miss Nancy Kennard and myself may stand in the same company, forsaking all relations that would otherwise separate us in race. Companionship of minds is a grand and noble thing. It destroys the peculiarity of selfishness of race. It holds out a reward far above the common level of human things. To the philosopher, the physical man is nothing. It is the mental man that counts. The mental man is the sole possessor and the sole owner, the sole captain and master of himself. This soul he expresses in poetry and in prose. It confines him to no particular race or any particular country. The, the mind of Shakespeare was not purely English, nor was the mind of Cicero purely Roman. Neither were the minds of Socrates and Plato purely Greek. The empire of those minds extend around the world. It is a company to which only noble characters particularly are admitted. It is the company in which Miss Nancy Kennard finds herself at this particular time, which the narrow selfishness of her own race does not understand. Those who live for the companionship of the mind live in an atmosphere higher and loftier than anything temporarily physical. We must remember that when all that is physical decays, all that is higher and nobler mentally lives on. The good deeds of men never die. Whether we record them on parchment, bronze, or marble, the ages keep company with them. And so, whilst the ashes of Socrates molder with Greek dust, whilst the ashes of Cicero molder with Roman dust, while the ashes of Hegel and Spinoza, Darwin and Huxley, Ladd and James and Marx molder with their national earth, the mental spirit of the men goes on and on to inspire and ennoble others as they succeed to the careers of previous generations. When Miss Kennard is gone, as she must go, the way of physical beings, her kindly thoughts, her gentle mental sympathies for a race downtrodden and oppressed shall live forever. When the millions sterling of her fathers shall corrode and rust and probably be lost to the Kennard generations for her deeds, she shall be remembered. We are therefore encouraging her in this companionship of minds. Forsake not the great task that lies before you, but pursue it because it leads to immortality and the continuous worship at a shrine that shall ever blossom with the fragrance of the sweet rose. How can man live or die better than by tracing the footsteps of immortality? It is not the common mind that establishes immortality. It is the high mind, the lofty mind, the conscious, self-possessed mental sparkle of divinity. We are divine in our thoughts because thoughts are the creators of all things visible and invisible. The divine mind is master of the universe. The human mind is master of its particular world, so that we should always dignify and ennoble that divine attribute that links us to supreme divinity. The source of all good thought is love, divine love. And how could we rise to loftier and nobler heights without emulating that love even to the human limit? It is the possession and the execution of this love that link Miss Nancy Kennard with the Negro race. It is the same love that makes the Black man think kindly even of an offending world towards him. These are the thoughts that will save us. These are the thoughts that inspire divine goodness with patience, notwithstanding the vicious and wicked sins of men. I must conclude in saying that Miss Nancy Kennard is in the highest company that man can select, and that it is the noble company of minds that think alike for the good and salvation of the world. I don't know who Nancy Kennard was, but let's look her up when we get done. You said I missed who he said the pairs were. The pairs of what, Oni? Greetings, KW Don 7. How are you tonight? Some random that's what I thought. I thought she was some random white person. I don't know what his relationship was with her, but she apparently had some type of impression, left some type of impression on him. The Communist and the Negro, an article in the New Jamaican published September 5th, 1932 by Marcus Garvey. A cable dispatch from London stated that a communist body at a gathering of its members decided to suspend propaganda work among colored Americans because of the inherent ignorance of the colored races, which makes their unity impossible. The body also declared that it was a futile endeavor to enlighten born fools. We are peculiar in our opinions, peculiar only because these opinions are arrived at through mature consideration and ripe experience, which is not consistent with local opinions because we are accustomed to express ourselves locally more through sentiment than facts. While we have a good deal of sentiment in us, we also have a superabundance of seriousness, calculated to be interested only in those things that are right and stating only those things which are true. To be responsible for such opinions in Jamaica is sometimes to be very unpopular among sentimental people who never like the truth but who prefer to hide it. That the colored man is sentimental goes without saying. It is very flimsy sentimentally that is going to destroy him as a racial group. He is now being destroyed in America at a rapid rate because he will not become serious enough to think on the problems that confront him and work seriously to solve them. The colored or Negro race seem to think that the world owes an obligation to them to cuddle, pamper, tickle, and tolerate them as children are generally treated in the nursery. They have not yet grown to realize that they are living in a serious world, and to hold their place it, in it, they must be serious and assertive on their own account. We feel confident in saying that no one in our present time has had more experience with the colored or Negro race than we have had. We therefore feel ourselves competent to pass judgment or an opinion on the colored people. The term colored is confused with the term Negro. In America, when both terms are used, they mean the same thing. We are using them from the American understanding. We state this because we do not want any local confusion. The communists have declared that the colored people are born fools. There is something significant in this. We agree, not only in the sense that all men are born fools until they are able to absorb and understand, but the colored people are peculiarly ignorant of their rights and privileges. They take more talking to and more persuasive influencing than any other group of people in the world. And even when you think you have achieved something and pointing them to that which should be theirs, when you least expect it, you find them just where they were before. That must have been the experience of the communists with the Negroes in the United States and in other parts of the world where they have been trying, at least for 6 years, to radically influence them towards communism. Again, the communists say that the colored people are cursed with inherent ignorance. We suppose they mean ignorance towards their political rights. Again, we agree. In agreeing with the statements of the communists, we must state clearly that we are not supporters of communism. Communists have been our bitter foes for the last 10 years. They have done us a great deal of harm in the United States. They made attempts several times to operate an organization of 4 million colored people, of which we were head. And when we stopped them and stubbornly resisted them all around, they initiated a vile and wicked propaganda against us, calling us capitalists, bourgeoisie, opportunists, and Uncle Toms. We declared then and we declare now that the Negro should not allow himself to be absorbed by communism because ultimately communism in its treatment of Negroes will be no better than the other isms we have had since the Negro came in contact with European civilization. I'm going to read that again. Communism in its treatment of Negroes will be no better than the other isms we have had since the Negro came in contact with European civilization. We declared then and still declare that communism among Negroes was only an effort to line up another powerful minority group with other discontented minority groups of the world to strengthen the hands of communism to smash the present order, out of which would rise a universal communism that would be as dangerous to the peace of the world and as oppressive to control as any other system that went before. Communism is just as bad as all the rest. We claimed then and we claim now that a European communist will be no different when he gets into power to the Southern cracker of the United States. The cracker has in his blood the desire and wish to kill and brutalize the Negro because of his vaunted image of superiority based upon the difference of color. When you scratch the communist beneath the surface, you will find the same vicious Southerner whose political belief will not surmount his racial prejudices. And for this, we have always kept communism at bay. Hence, no one will make mistakes for us having any sympathy for the communists as far as bringing the Negro into communism is concerned. We are interested only to watch the results of their mighty effort and to seize our chance to be what we ought to be by not being born fools. Can we blame the communists for calling us born fools in America when the opportunity is ripe, pointed the Negro toward the building up of great industrial enterprises, the establishment of steamship lines to link up the commerce of the race throughout the world, and particularly Africa, the West Indies, and North America? The intellectual fools of the Negro race laughed when I told them it was time to get a hold of Liberia and make it the center of the Negro world activities, thereby demonstrating to the other nations that the colored man was able to build and control a nation of his own. The Negro intellectuals laughed again. We organized a plan for building 4 modern cities in the Republic of Liberia as the first concentration centers for the Negro of the West Indies and America to link up their intelligence with the native African in the scheme of nation building. When we were able to influence the Liberian government to give a concession of lands and a budget of $2 million was prepared to start the work, the engineers and experts landed on the spot in Liberia. A black president of Liberia by the name of Charles Dunbar King, who had acquiesced to the proposition, saw the possibility of getting graft from Harvey Firestone, the American millionaire of Firestone Rubber Company. He gave to the Firestone interests the landed concessions in Liberia that were intended to be the concentration centers of Negro colonists who were to go there to build up the republic and prove to the world that the Negro was capable in government. Just at this minute, we have on our desk a confidential report we have received from Geneva, a plea from an ambassador from Liberia asking us to help now to do the thing that we attempted to do 8 years ago, because the Firestone interests have ravished the country and have reduced the people to almost a state of serfdom, to be mildly relieved only by the timely effort of the League of Nations. Do you wonder that the communists call the race so childish and simple born fools? The communists must have had their experience to have come to the conclusions that we, by experience, felt long ago, and which made us aggravated because so much could have been done otherwise. We know that most of the Negroes who have led communism in America and in other parts of the world have done so only because of the easy money they could collect from the Soviet Union or from the Communist Party. The Negro has not yet learned to project honorable and honest leadership. The communists are therefore tired of paying out to the Negroes to help themselves. We feel sure that the Negroes are paying very little into communism because outside of the great effort we headed in America and outside of the churches and a few organizations that keep the Negro sentimental all the time, he is not willing to foot his own bills. Politically, he is not willing to pay his price. Anything political must be contributed to and paid for by somebody else for him. Otherwise, he is not interested. These are only fringes of truth that could be told. But why tell them except to help? We have hinted enough to help us to realize the sad position we are in, and we do hope that some good will come out of the charge that the communists have made against the colored people. So as you can see, he felt some kind of way about communists. Give me one moment. The greetings, Brother Bakari. How are you today? Sister Ross says that Nancy Kennard was a Caucasoid British writer and political activist. She was fake. She was a faker. Brother Bakari is here. Sister Ross says, should say taught fools overstand. Absolutely. So as you can see, Garvey in those last years of the movement, in the rebuilding movement, he had quite a bit to say about how our women were being treated, about how communism is not the answer for us. He had quite a bit to say about revering and respecting white people that actually help us. What do you guys think about that? I think that Garvey had had interesting experiences with white people, similar to Booker T. Washington, in that he was politicking. He had gotten support from these people at different times during his movement, and he had an opportunity to see that not all of them were bad. Some of them actually had decent intentions, but at the end of the day, we have to treat them all with a long handled spoon. And that is the end of our reading for today. We read pages 300 through 321. The forecast says he was right. It doesn't matter which ism if we don't have the right mindset. You're absolutely correct. If we don't have the right mindset, none of the isms are going to help us, because isms are about people that are consciously aware of their peoplehood, of their personhood, um, people that are in their right minds. And we are not, as a group. But as a small group, as a family unit, as a small organization, we have the right stuff to capitalize on an ism. I think that communism, capitalism, those isms are not going to help us. The only ism that's going to help us is Garveyism. Oh, I have somebody coming up. Greetings, Brother Bakari. How are you tonight? Can you hear me?
I'm absolutely magnificent. How are you?
I am absolutely wonderful. Thanks for tuning in. What's going on?
Well, I was listening. I could tell Garvey didn't trust Russia, right?
No, he didn't
The
trust
USA,
Russia, but he was willing to
'cause-
use their resources.
but he knew they was in it for their own gain, right?
Mm-hmm.
For personal gain. And
Right.
I try to get people to understand that today. Why they want some people want us to reach out to Russia today. Oh, they gonna no, Russia ain't gonna save you. But anyway, uh, we have to understand our situation. And when you say Garvey spoke similar to Booker T. Washington, that's kind of like Booker T. Washington is the reason he initially came to the United States was because of Booker T. Washington. After reading the book Up from Slavery, and then
Yep.
learning of the things that Booker T. Washington had done, right?
Yep.
Now let me show you something. And this is what I tell people during the reparations argument. White people was willing to help Booker T. Washington. White people, I'm saying some, a few white people, right? With money. Then a
Right.
few of them was willing to help Marcus Garvey. Because you know what Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington both, they both, in a sense, promised white people we don't want to live around you.
Yes.
Those they didn't mind helping because you wanted your own, because they don't want you around them, right?
Right.
And the point that I'm making is that's what I try to get people to understand when it comes to the reparations argument. These people don't want you around them. You're not saying you want to build your own country, you want your own state, you want to be nationalist, you want to be by yourself. And that's what Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington did. Isaiah T. Montgomery, you can name a lot of them who said, we don't want to be a part of that. We want our own. And that's what we should be searching for. That's what we should be searching for today, is our own.
I agree. I think that that's one of the faults of the reparations movement is that they want America to give them money to stay and live comfortably in America. And that's not how any of this works, unfortunately. But if you claim and hold fast to nationhood elsewhere, and then you began your fight for reparations and repatriation, then that is a different discussion. And at several times in American history, they have said that they would be willing to support a grassroots movement of Black people that say they want to go back to some native land and leave here.
Yeah. And what I told people, this is one thing, this is something else that if we really like, they want reparations, but want the United States to be their nation. Talk to some of these people that call themselves ADOS or FBA. Ask them about becoming part of the Gullah Geechee Nation. Watch how they speak of the Gullah Geechee. See, the Gullah Geechee, and I ask people, is that something we should think about doing? Because you do know the Gullah Geechees have their own nation, right?
I do
The
know the
Gullah
Gullah
Geechee,
Geechees have their own nation, and I know that they are looking for African Americans to come help them develop their land, but in lieu of that, they letting the white people come.
well, they ain't letting them come. They're taking it. They've been down there fighting. They're
Okay.
not letting them come. No, they are not letting them come. I was in Charleston a couple years ago, and I went out. Me and my daughter, we went out. They are not. They are not letting them come. They are not. That's why they. That's not the only reason, but that's part of the reason they want some of us to come. And if and if we talk to some from Charleston, South Carolina, it's beef with the Geechees from Charleston. Not real beef, but a slight beef. The Geechees from South Carolina and the Geechees from Savannah, Georgia. Because what's happening in South Carolina is what the Geechees in Savannah, Georgia started. The Geechees in Savannah, Georgia sold out. And they say they've been telling people how good it is. They're not letting them come. There's because Queen Cat is still speaking of Queen Cat is their representation. We used to talk over email. I used to talk over email to the with the Gullah Geechee Nation. And I've asked people, is that something we should, because it's our nation, it's our people. We talk about language, we should have our own language. They have their own language. They put about 4 different African languages together and created their own language.
Mm.
So, and what I'm saying is, so then if we all represented that nation, then you could say, for the ones who are arguing for reparations, me personally, I don't think it's gonna happen, especially in the way it is right now. They don't have to give you nothing if we don't change what we're doing. But why give you something you're gonna still support them? But then at least we would have a nation, and at least we would have representation in the United Nations. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand
And
what
and
you're
that
saying.
was and that was the greatness of Garvey, the greatness of Booker T. Washington, the greatness of Isaiah T. Montgomery. We don't want to be part of your government. We don't want to be around y'all. Just let us get to, and we're gonna do our thing. You understand? And and
Mhm.
and, and when you find them, those people they were able to have success. But even then, I guess enough of our people didn't see it and didn't understand it because I don't know why. But we need to see it and understand it today. That in order for you need a nation. We have a nation right here inside of a nation. Just like you look on those reservations, they have a Cherokee nation, a Choctaw nation. You know, they have a nation inside of this nation, right?
Right.
So, and they get compensation. So, if we had the Gullah Geechee nation inside of this nation, instead of everybody trying to create small fringe groups, that's just a suggestion for me that I think more of us should be interested in until we decide to see only how the ultimate idea is Africa. And that's my ultimate goal next 3 years, Africa. But while I'm here, I want all my people here and I want us to do better here. I don't care where I am. I got to be willing and ready to fight. But my suggestion is we should come together and talk and meet and see if we can get together and make a trip to the Gullah Geechee Nation, contact them through email, and see if we can go down there and see what we have to do to be a part of the nation. That's just my suggestion.
I think that that is an excellent suggestion. I think that we need to tap into all of the resources that are available to us. And if that is a resource that's available to us and they're willing to partner with us, then we should seriously discuss it offline. Offline.
Because I'm going to tell you right now, in the next 50 years, Gullah Geechee is going to be white. And because
You
when we
think it's going
went,
to
and
take
remember,
50 years? I don't think it's going to take 50 years because of
well, but
miscegenation.
the reason I say that, because there's still a lot of those black people down there, especially North Charleston. They separated the city, Charleston and North Charleston, and you can clearly see the difference. But a lot of those people, they are still proud. They are still proud Gullah Geechee. They are still proud. You go down there and you find and you see African Americans, well, Gullah people, the Gullah Geechees. You go in their restaurants and they're still cooking African food. They can still speak the language. I sat down and I talked to a few of the elders when I was there. But you put in the Gullah Islands, which one you should, and they took us to James Island. My daughter was like, "Dad, we thought the Gullahs was black." I said, "They are black. Ain't nobody over here black." I know. So you're right.
Mm,
I said 50 years because nobody on James Island was black. Nobody.
mm.
The most popular beaches where everybody go, that's Gullah Island. All the beaches, all that was Gullah Geechee land. They say they took it and made it like tourist attraction. Now the Gullah Geechees don't even live out there around those islands, really.
Now,
You
is
didn't
it,
find many.
do they have the same problem with securing government funding that we have?
Yes, they have some. They have the same problems. They have a lot of the same problems that we have. But they feel with their own nation. And if more of us come to the nation, that it would be better, especially with them having their own representation. But like, how many people that's part of the Gullah Geechee Nation? So what are you representing? You understand? I understand what she's representing. I'm not saying that like she ain't representing nothing, but I understand it's not many. It should be millions and millions of African Americans proud to say they're part of the Gullah Geechee Nation. Even if you don't live, you don't have to live on the islands in South Carolina uh, or Savannah and be a part of their nation. I'm not telling you to leave where you are, but we could be a part of the nation, and it's strength in numbers. Just the numbers would make the nation a little bit stronger, and we'll have more of a leg to stand on, right? She was
Hmm.
in they were at the United Nations talking about, because that's one of the things she's been talking about, how their land has been taken, and where they are trying to be pushed to, where they're trying to push them to, and they are trying to preserve their land. They wanted to stop them from speaking their language, but they're going to preserve their language. And when you say government funding, yes, they don't get the money, but you, like I say, you go to those islands now, the 2, 3 most popular, James Island, that wasn't a beach where people was going out there. That was like subdivisions was around that. And as I'm talking to the people and talking to the kids, they were like, all of this is black, all of this is our land. And that's part of the thing that she's been discussing with the United Nations too, how they want all of their land back. Because this is land that was given to them.
Hmm.
So, and
And
they
so,
want it back.
okay. And so, as an African American, you're saying that they're very welcoming to us when it comes to like trying to have heritage and cultural ties to them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think me and my daughter, I think we were down there for 2, 3 days. There was one couple of islands that we didn't get to go visit, but we plan to go back. Me and my kids, we plan to go back this summer. They're older now. Well, my oldest son, my youngest son, he already knew, and my daughter, she's learning, so they're older now, and it'll have more of an effect on her cultural effect. Where she understand what she'll be 20, but she'll have more of an understanding and the importance of it. But yeah, they
Mm.
want us, and but she enjoyed it, and we enjoyed North Charleston. I'm just gonna say the street. I don't know the name of it. I'm gonna give it a name: Charleston Highway. You didn't have to see the people. You didn't have to see the people. Just look at the street. All you had to do was look at the street, and you could tell, okay, we in the black area, because you could tell where the money stopped. This where the geeches are, because you could tell. Just look at the streets, and you could tell where the money stopped. One street will go from smooth paved road area taken care of to now you got to dodge potholes.
Hmm. Okay.
But
Well,
see, then a
see,
problem like, do you remember that guy? I don't know. He got known on YouTube, but he didn't win. That was running for Senate or something in South Carolina.
Marcel, the
And
one, the
ye-
trans guy, the queer guy.
yeah. See,
Yeah,
the problem
Marcel.
is the people like him was trying to convince the Gullah Geechees to say they're Native American because that's what he was pushing. See, we're originally from here. We the real Native Americans. But that's also why he didn't get no votes. The Gullahs
Mm.
didn't even vote. Nobody voted for him. He was blown out the water.
Yeah, I thought. Yeah, I remember him. He was interesting. He had some interesting ideas, but he pushed that Gullah Geechee thing, trying to say that he was Gullah Geechee and that he could understand and make the ties between the Africans and the African Americans.
Yeah, but then he'll come back and say they the real Native Americans. He's FBA. We're not African. Because he had joined their movement.
Yeah, it sounds like he didn't have his politics right. He didn't get his story straight. See, I learned years ago that politics is just the story that you tell and that you try to live out every day. And if you get your politics right, you can get the money right too. But until you get your politics right, you'll be going from here, there, and everywhere. And this reading of Garvey has really helped me understand that I've been a Garveyite all my life and I didn't even know it, you know?
Yep, that's the same. That's the exact same thing that I say. I didn't even know it, but yes, that's how that's how you live your life. Then you realize that. Yep. But thank
Hmm.
you for letting me speak. I just wanted to get on and mention that.
Thank you for coming
Thank-
up. I appreciate you. Sister Ross says
uh,
they didn't support us when we asked for the money and transport back to Africa. No, they didn't, and they never will support us when we ask to leave them because that is their labor class that they would be sending away. And they don't want to send away their labor class at all. They want free labor or cheap labor. They would prefer cheap black labor and then to import whites that have higher class and higher status. Um, as as I said, I didn't know that all my life I was a Garveyite and that I don't hate white people necessarily. I hate what they've done. I hate some of their history. But if they're willing to help, then they can send money, they can send support, but they cannot be a part of my organization. And I feel that the mulatto class doesn't really have a place in leadership, but the mulatto class has a place when it comes to being able to get the funds because they want to take care of their interracial children. But the white people want a pure race, and I want a pure black race. And I am tired. Just earlier in the reading, Marcus Garvey spoke about how Black Negro men would spend two-thirds of their life accumulating and amassing wealth from the Black community. And then they would marry a white woman. And then they would shortly, soon after, die. And all of his money and all of his wealth and all of his fortune and all that he worked for would go to that white family and not to his Black family. And don't we see that today with these basketball stars and these entertainers and all these different people in high positions and these dentists and doctors that decide to marry out? It's almost as if they hate themselves. It's almost as if they are trying to whitewash the blackness that they have inside of them. So I think that we have to really do what we can to encourage black on black marriages. Because if not, then we're going to go extinct. Remember, integration and assimilation are just attempts at extinction. Don't I tell y'all that all the time? And did you hear Marcus Garvey telling you that same thing? So I will be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to read part 6, The Last Years of Garvey, starting on page 323. I want to thank the forecast for their contributions, Sister Raw, and the elders that listen with her for their contributions, Bawana Haguziki, Bakari. I want to thank Dorico Cooper. I want to thank I want to thank Oni for listening. I want to thank Sister Raw for listening. I want to thank Anthony McPhail for listening, Koku for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. I want to thank Afro Native for their contributions and for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. You all mean something special to me because we are Black and we are powerful. Now, Bakari says more than 100 years later, we're still doing the same thing. It's time for us to change if we want to see and make a change and make a difference. Stop lying to yourself. Stop trying to change others. So I appreciate each and every one of you for listening. I value you. I'll be putting a post up in about a week and a half, maybe closer to the beginning of April, about what we should read next. I think we should read something by Booker T. Washington or something about Booker T. Washington next. Um, so that we can maybe get into some of the consciousness that he had, some of the things that he was writing. So you guys let me know what you think. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming through tonight, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Peace, guys.